was shooting a video. My company called right in the middle of it, had to get off, deal with that, and now I'm back and my live video disappeared. Huh. Well, that was interesting. Okay, we start over again. I am between Atlanta and Chattanooga at northbound. I'm doing a delivery to Knoxville right now, so I'm on the Oklahoma. As I've mentioned numerous times before, I am a big-time World War II buff, and I've read multiple stories about certain events, and I'll read it from different people's angles. And some are the big picture, and some are autobiographies and whatnot. I like to dig into the nitty-gritty details, little stuff you don't really hear about. And I've also talked to World War II vets, which are mostly gone now. But I've talked. This is about 13 years old. There's a famous event that happened in World War II in 1943, where the U.S. military intercepted the airplane carrying General Yamamoto of the Imperial Japanese Navy, shot the plane down. And it was all based on intelligence intercept, knowing where he was going to be. History books records it as this well-run, smoothly operated job where they said, okay, he's going to be here. Let's send these planes. No problem. They went up, they did, took care of it. They came home, took him, shot him down, took him out. Everybody slapped high fives, and it was, that was it. But there was a little more going on there in the planning process and execution if you start digging. And I kind of got a kick out of that because I was reading this the other day. The American naval intelligence had broken the Japanese code. There was a diplomatic code and a military code. One was called the Purple Code and the IJ or JI 25. And the military, that's one of the reasons Pearl Harbor happened the way it did, is that we had broken the diplomatic code, but the information didn't travel through the pipeline fast enough to tell them when something was about to go down. Just technology and time. But they had a 24-hour warning about his flight, and General Yamamoto, or Admiral Yamamoto, was famous for being on time. He wasn't late for anything, so they scheduled this to intercept him. How are we gonna do this? And the Navy was hot to trot to take care of this, so they said, okay, we'll send in a naval task force. Yeah, that's not going to work. If you send in a naval task force, he's not going to show up. And where he was going, and I don't remember the name of it, but there was an air base and a military base. There was a channel across the other side of the channel. There was another air base and smaller military base. So it was a very concentrated area of Japanese forces. So sending in a task force is going to stir up all this attention, and then everybody's going to, kind of wave him off. So he said, okay. His itinerary says he's going to land at this base at this time. He's going to tour, and at this time, he's going to get on a little patrol boat, go across this bay or this sound to this other base 8-10 miles away, and he's going to do that. So we'll send, this is the Navy talking, we'll send in a submarine into this bay, and submarines are extremely vulnerable to aircraft. But they want to send a submarine into this bay in broad daylight and have him poke his periscope up and down until he sees the patrol boat, and then pop to the surface. Everybody's going to get out, man the deck gun, and shoot full of holes and kill him. Right. Okay, what if he doesn't get, they don't take him out? What if he gets on a life raft? What if he gets on a life vest? And what happens when the submarine gets swarmed by 50 aircraft because it's on the surface in broad daylight? That's not going to work. So he said, okay. We'll take him out in the air. We'll send some Navy fighters to the closest base we can get to. And we'll fly up there, and we'll intercept him and shoot him down. Wrong. The technology of the day. Once again, you do not have the range to fly up there from where they can be the closest they get to and do this and fly back. You couldn't do it. We'll put drop tanks on the aircraft. Yeah, still don't have enough range to fly it just over 300 miles one way, do air-to-air combat, and return. It's not going to happen. So the Navy had to do like the worst thing possible, in their opinion, was to hand it off to the Army Air Force. Remember, there was no Air Force then. It was considered the Army Air Force. They considered Army pilots to be knuckle-dragging Neanderthals. But they had the P-38 Lightning. That's that twin-engine plane. And it, if outfitted correctly, could actually reach that distance. So they went, okay, we're going to drop our standards and lower our heads, and we're going to ask the Army to do it. Because of the distance, and the thing to remember about the airplanes of the day, these are very large piston aircraft engines designed for power and not necessarily fuel efficiency. I don't know the burn rate of a P-38 Lightning, but I know the single engine P-47 burned 2 gallons per minute. Just let you know. So they have these drop tanks. They're 160 gallons apiece. So they can say, okay, we'll put a pair of 160s on it. Still not enough fuel range. But there was a 320-gallon drop tank available. The only problem is they didn't have that many of them. So they scavenged up the ones they could get their hands on. They got a total of 16 P-38 Lightnings together. They didn't have near enough tanks for all of them, so they gave each airplane one 320-gallon drop tank and one 160-gallon drop tank, which are mounted underneath the aircraft. Now think about the oddball weight. Aviation fuel is 6.8 pounds per gallon times 160 gallons. And that's the awkwardness of one side or the other. So the aircraft's completely out of balance. They say, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, in the fighter aircraft world, you have a whole bunch of guys who can fly a fighter plane and a very small group of guys that are fighter pilots. So they did some interviewing and talked to them and figured out who were the fighter pilots. When they came down to it, they had 4. So you have 4 people that are going to intercept the bombers, and you have the other 12 pilots that are going to be their escort when the Japanese send up, 0 fighters to intercept them. So you get the mission together. They say, okay, we're going to take off here. We're going to fly 50 feet across the water, go way out here, navigate over open water, which is not really what the Army does, and fly over here and pop up. Well, on takeoff roll, one of the planes hit it's called PSP, perforated steel plank they made runways out of. And he got a flat tire, so they lost one plane, he pulled off, and now they got 15. So the 15 aircraft take off. They're sitting in these glass bubbles. And take it from me, when you're sitting in a glass bubble flying along, it gets hot. Now, when you climb to altitude, it gets colder, but these guys are flying at 50 feet, so they're baking in the sun in those things. So they're navigating by time, distance, and heading. They fly out, they go over to this island, they get to the area, they're now just over 300 miles out, they pop up, they've only got a few back. And sure enough, there's 2 bombers. One's going to have Yamamoto and the other's going to have some of his staff. They use bombers as transports. The Japanese didn't really have a transport plane standalone. And 6 escort fighters. So the 4 guys that were tasked with taking out the bombers turn towards the bombers. The other 12 guys go to engage the fighter aircraft. On the way over, you take in the cockpit when you're running on drop tanks. You want to get rid of those when you go do air-to-air combat. It's aerodynamically, it kind of throws you off, it slows down your responses, it slows the aircraft down. And it's kind of like boxing, wearing a really heavy backpack. You can't move around as much. So you get rid of your drop tanks. So you reach down, you flip a lever, so you're no longer sucking fuel out of the drop tanks, you're taking it off your internals, and then you pull another handle and it releases the tanks. Well, of the 4 planes, there's a lead, and then there's his wingman. So you got 1, 2 over here, 1, 2 over here. The first guy pulls the release handle and the drop tanks don't fall off. So he bounces the airplane a little bit, they still don't drop off. And one desperate technique to get rid of your drop tank was to dive, go really, really fast, and then pull G's, and then yank the handle and essentially rip them off their tank, which is what he ended up doing. So he turned away from the intercept and dived to get up his speed to rip off. His wingman followed him, because that's what the wingman does. The wingman always follows the lead pilot. So now you have 2 fighter planes going in to take out these 2 bombers. In the middle of all this, 3 of the Japanese interceptors are going to make a head-on attack at the 2 Lightnings heading in. So again, instinctively, you turn into the attacker, so you're guns to guns. And the wingman, whose name was Rex Barber, instinctively started to follow. And then he remembered they hammered into his head, whatever happens, shoot down the bombers. So breaking all protocol and training and instinct, he turned away from his lead and went after the bombers. He saw him, he turned sharp, he rolled out. He was close to one, he couldn't see the other one. It disappeared. Well, it turns out later it was underneath him like 50 feet, but he couldn't see it. He fired a deflection shot, braked the side of the bomber. The right engine started smoking. He snapped around, came back, hit the left side of the aircraft. The left engine burst into flames. Half the wing fell off. The bomber twisted and fell into the jungle, exploded. That was actually the aircraft that had Admiral Yamamoto on it. He then turned to go back out towards the water, and he saw some movement out of the corner of his eye, and it was the other bomber trailing a little bit of white smoke. That's what caught his attention. And as he's coming around towards it, he looks, there's nobody shooting at it, there's nobody following it, there's nobody in sight. So he comes in behind that one, does the same thing, shoots it full of holes, and it goes down in the water. Then he rolls out and heads back. Which was, so one guy basically made that happen. There was one P-38 that got shot up, and on the way back you had aircraft, they called it a Dumbo. It was a Catalina flying boat, and his job was to pick up pilots that had gone in the drink. Well, the Dumbo pilot said, okay, you don't have any, head back, and he's flying along, and a P-38 pulls up alongside him with one engine shot out. And the guy, they come up on the radio, and they say, hey, what's going on? And he says, well, it's looking bad, but I think I can make it back. And the Dumbo guy said, well, if you want a ditch in the water, we'll pick you up because it's a seaplane. And he says, no, I think I can make it. The guy flies off the distance. Turns out the guy never made it. They never found him. He disappeared. So that was the one casualty that was taken during that raid. What was strange is after the war, there was huge controversy about who shot down what. And Rex Barber was following his lead. The guy's name's Lampier. And Lampier jumped up and down and screamed and yelled and hollered that he was the one that shot down Yamamoto, which he did not. And I don't know why that happened, because the history's pretty well laid out, but he tried to take credit for it, and that went on for years. But that's how that went down, and they had to keep it secret. They couldn't talk about it on the radio. They couldn't talk about it in dispatches, because if you say, hey, we shot down so-and-so, they're going to say, well, how did you know he was there? So they just had to act like it was just a regular mission, and that's how it turned out. So they had to keep it quiet, even though some people did make some noise, but the Japanese didn't actually hear about it. And the reason I'm bringing this whole storyline up, is the simple fact that history is very clean. Oh yeah, they worked it out, everything worked great. Yeah, there was all kinds of bad planning and bad blood, and everything went sideways, but it turned out. It's like the meal coming out of the kitchen is great. You just don't want to see what the kitchen looks like. You boil it up. Well, this is a nice piece of highway here. I like driving earlier in the day like this for the shadows and whatnot. And I like just before the sun goes down too. The middle of the day is kind of boring, but I like driving these conditions. But that's my war story of the day. I like telling. I like relating stories I've heard. Little details you don't really catch there. All right, I'm gonna call this one off. Take care.